Welcome to season 2 of the SoothSight Podcast, where we delve into the cutting edge world of AI and data science. Today, we have a distinguished guest whose career exemplifies leadership in innovation, business, and technology. Dr. Soumitra Dutta, Dean of the Saïd Business School at the University of Oxford. Dr. Dutta has a remarkable background, including a PhD and MS in computer science and AI, as well as an MBA from UC-Berkeley and a BTech from IIT Delhi. Prior to his role at Oxford, he was the founding dean of the S.C. Johnson College of Business at Cornell, where he led significant initiatives, including the creation of the Cornell Tech Campus in New York. Dr. Dutta also spent over 2 decades leading INSEAD's Tech and Innovation Research Center and has served on the boards of notable global companies such as Sodexo, ZS, and currently Dassault. He founded Fisheye Analytics in 2008, which was subsequently acquired by the advertising giant WPP in 2013. In addition, he is the founding advisor at Green Frontier Capital, India's pioneering climate-focused VC fund, as well as the president of the DC-based Portulans Institute, a major research and educational organization focused on digital transformation and innovation. Our goal today is to explore Dr. Dutta's insights on the intersection of AI, innovation, business, and education, and to discuss his vision for the future of technology and solving global challenges. Dr. Dutta, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
So you have a very interesting background. I heard you refer to your journey as one of those serendipitous moments that redirects your life unexpectedly. So perhaps we can start with a bit about what inspired your transition from computer science to leading world-class business schools, and what's been the most challenging aspect of integrating technology into traditional business curricula.
Well, thank you so much, Chris. And it's life is a journey you can't fully predict. So I was doing my computer science PhD at Berkeley in the mid-80s, very happy, to be in the Bay Area. And then, of course, I met my wife, and things happen. And she was on a Fulbright scholarship, so she had to leave the US for 2 years. So essentially, I had to make the tough decision whether to follow her with a young baby back to Europe or whether to stay in the US and stay separate for a couple of years. And I made the decision to go back and be close to our daughter, who was a very young child that time, and her. And that led me to my job in Europe, which happened to be in a business school. So I didn't actually choose it by deliberate choice. It sort of happened to be the place that wanted to give me a job offer, and I liked it, and I thought it was a good place to spend a couple of years. And those couple of years, what were meant to be 2 years, became essentially 22 years. I stayed out there. And then I, of course, built a whole career in a business school. But what is interesting is that when I joined a business school in precise 1989, 1990, technology was not seen as strategic. Technology was a back office function. And technology was seen as an operational back office function, and operations were not seen as strategic either. And what has been remarkable is, and I could not have predicted that, back in 1990, is how technology has moved from the forefront completely of technology of everything inside the company. So for me, that has been a remarkable, serendipitous journey of how technology is really sort of transitioned in the core of business strategy. And in some sense, being in a business school, I have seen the transition happen firsthand. So that's been the life journeys for me so far professionally. Yeah.
Very interesting. So AI has shown great promise in creating personalized education experiences, tailoring learning paths to individual student needs and preferences. It doesn't necessarily have to go down that route, but from your perspective, what are the transformative potentials of AI in education, and how might these advancements reshape global education systems?
So I think if you look at the two sides to look at, first of all, let's look at where is AI today? Okay, so how much has AI progressed in different sort of fields? If you look at what human beings do, I'm putting them in very large buckets. What we do is we analyze data, data points to get some insights or recognize some patterns. It might be as simple as recognizing an image pattern, or it might be recognizing a sales pattern and sales data. But there's an analysis of data That is a very important part of what human beings do as a being intelligent analysis. Another thing what human beings do is the creativity part. We create new patterns. We actually come up with new insights and new ways of interpreting and doing things. And creativity is really the novel part of what we do in our reasoning and thinking. And the third very important group of what we do as a human being is form relationships with people. This is the empathy part, Humans connect with each other, form bonds with each other. Today, if you look at where AI stands, AI pretty much has proven to be better than human beings in the first bucket. You give it multidimensional data that not even the human mind cannot handle. AI will actually analyze the data and come up with interesting patterns. So that kind of, that's sort of been conquered by technology already. And that's a huge chunk of what we do. The second chunk is creativity, and that's where AI is making tremendous progress. Now, more and more, you have systems, whether it's for industrial design or whether it's a fashion design, systems that are able to suggest to human designers what is a possible option or what are the range of options to consider. Today, in most cases, industrial design or fashion design has become a case of choosing between different options that the machine suggests to you. And it's only a question of time before the machine suggestion becomes good enough to be accepted. So today, mostly the machine's creativity is subject to human oversight, and machine creativity helps the human being becomes more creative, but the gap is becoming smaller and smaller. The third thing of empathy, it is interesting to note that humans have traditionally excelled in that. But if you have seen the movie Her, which is a wonderful movie about a man falling in love with his operating system, released in 2013. In 2014, a bot was released called Soothsayer in China, and that bot today is the girlfriend of more than 600 million Chinese males. So it's a real-life version of what the movie predicted, or at least depicted, in 2013. And it's not just a question of this bot that is a girlfriend of young males or older males in China, but also is used actually in bots, for example, treating people with mental disorders or people in psychologically stressed situations like young teenagers. So what you're finding is technology has also been used to form emotional bonds via AI systems. So again, it's not yet as strong as human being, but it's getting there and it's getting pretty good in some cases. So if you look at all these three things and you say, okay, how will it impact education? The answer is huge, okay, because clearly education, it can be used to analyze situations and predict, patterns and predict, different solutions for students and for teachers. It can be used to suggest new solutions, suggest new creative aspects of problem solution. You have a problem that you give to a student to come up with innovative solution to a problem of waste management, let's say. Maybe the technology can suggest solutions to you which you haven't thought of easily. Even forming empathy or empathetic bonds with students, technology can do that today to some degree and become better and better. So the range of things that can be applied in education can actually vary and be very broad. Now, the question really out there is how much is education institutions or how much are universities or schools really doing? And the answer out there is not much right now. So technology-wise, universities, went up in the COVID pandemic. They used a lot of technology for distance learning, online learning. And after the COVID pandemic, the universities have all receded, gone backwards, regressed backwards, and going back to face-to-face learning by and large. So there's a huge focus on going back to where life was before COVID-19. And in many ways, I think the educational sector is ripe for a lot of application of new AI technologies, but a lot of those applications have not as yet happened. And I foresee a dramatic rise in these applications in the future. Imagine, for example, if you create avatars of every professor that looks like the professor, talks like the professor, but has all the professor's knowledge in the writings and also knowledge about the professor's field. Now, that is a tremendous asset if we can actually create that inside universities and deploy it for suggesting, helping, students in their time when they are back in the dormitories working on the problems in the evenings, or in educating people who don't even have access to proper education in emerging markets in Africa or Asia. So I think there's a tremendous potential for doing interesting things, but we have to be creative educational institutions to actually leverage that.
AI's transformed operations. Not only that, though, it's also like the very essence of leadership. So from, let's say, a decision making to strategic foresight, I mean, how has AI reshaped the role and responsibilities of leaders now then in the digital age?
So as I said, it depends on what you look as leadership being composed of. So if you look at leadership being composed of making sense of data, AI does it better than human beings today. Okay, so let's say you have a application for a mortgage, today the machine will analyze the mortgage application and give you a recommendation, yes or no. And on average, that recommendation is shown to be better than human beings. Okay, that's been shown in most cases to be true. Then, of course, the question of creativity. You might actually say that, well, a mortgage is only one part of the financial solution of a human being, of a person. The person might have a need, a life need or a business need, and maybe the mortgage is only one part of the solution. Maybe there's a whole notion of crafting together a complete solution by pulling together different products that the bank or organization offers for the solution for that need. And that creativity is something that machines can help, suggest different options to combine them in different ways. Machines can actually capture a lot of detailed product knowledge. As you know, in finance today, a lot of the product knowledge is very detailed, and it's hard for human beings to remember all the different product differentiation, different details that are required. Machines can also help, keep track of relationships, with human beings and the customers, or bank managers and the customers. So I would say, if it depends on how you define leadership, if you think of leadership in those three buckets, machines can actually help human beings to become better leaders. If, for example, the analysis you do becomes better because of machines, if, for example, the solutions you can create becomes better because you're more creative, and if, for example, the relationship you form with your customer is better because you understand the lifelong history of the relationship with the customer much better. You remember it much better. Normally, you go to a bank, your bank staff, because of turnover, because of other reasons, they don't know your history as well. They don't actually interact with you well, given your long history. So I think leadership can become better. But having said this, I must also add the caveat that if you start relying on technology too much, leadership can also get watered down. Because if you start losing your skills, for either making sense or questioning what the machine does. If you start losing your skills for trying to be creative, combining different solutions, products to form a solution. If you start becoming lazy, or you start becoming underskilled as compared to the level of skills required for, doing your job and making sense of the environment, you might actually become a worse off leader. So I think with leadership right now, it's very important for people, human beings, to think about the kind of education, the kind of skills required to succeed and to stay on top of the game. And at the same time, to be able to invest in those things more, like the human relationship side, where naturally human beings are better than machines so far. Maybe in the future, one day, when you have bots that, robotic human beings that look like human beings pretty much, then the situation might be different. But we are at least 10 years away from that. So in the next 10 years, basically human beings are still much better at building emotional bonds.
I want to pick up on this technology and human relationship thing here in a few minutes, but I'm wondering, and I'm sure you agree, that digital transformation has steered us into a realm where AI is no longer an afterthought, but a foundational pillar. And we're on the cusp of this paradigm shift. And so I'm wondering if you could describe your vision of an AI first organization, like how that core identity and ethos should look, and then what kind of traits truly set these entities apart.
Yeah. So, I think technology and AI is just a natural progression of digital technologies. So digital technologies have always been used for automation. And I suspect that will continue. Okay, so whenever AI or the latest digital technologies is able to automate a human task, it'll happen. And that's how the incentives are often set up, where today in most countries, the incentives are there higher to invest in technology as opposed to invest in human beings. So unless incentives get changed, because when you invest in a human being, you pay the salary, plus you pay social charges, plus your pension, you pay actually additional tax, which could be 50% or even more on the salary for a human hire. In case of machines, it's very different. You don't pay those taxes for one, and in many cases, you can depreciate the machine cost over a certain number of years. So I think the systems today are such that they are more favoring automation and deployment of machines whenever possible. Now, I think while that goes on, the challenge for organizations will be to rethink how can they do more or how can they do better with the technology deployment. So let's say in education, I might be able to automate some of the tasks for faculty, but then maybe I can ask the question, can I actually educate 10 times the number of students that I'm doing right now? Because technology enables me to reach out to many more people at a lower cost, like in a bank, with wealth management. Earlier, you needed a wealth manager to do physically, manually wealth management for 100 clients. Today, with the automated AI algorithms, robotic AI algorithms, you can do wealth management for millions of people at a fraction of the cost. Why? Because you can put all the knowledge inside that algorithm. So I think in terms of being able to utilize AI and building an AI-first organization, it'll happen because that's where the incentives are and that's where the technology is progressing. The challenge will be to keep the human factor relevant, and the challenge will be to have the courage to change the business model such that as you build an AI-first organization, you also are able to change your business, do more business, invest in people, invest in human beings in more creative ways. I think that's going to be the interesting thing. It's like, for example, saying in the case of education, let's assume hypothetically an AI bot could replace a professor. I might go and say, well, I don't need 100 professors because I can do by with five professors and a bot can do the rest. Or I might say that, well, actually, it is true for my current student numbers, I can do with 5 bots, 5 professors, and the rest of them being AI bots. But maybe with this AI bots now, I can keep the 100 professors and I can do 2 million students, not 2,000. And I think that's the kind of business model courage that you need, because it's not an easy decision for a school or university to say, I will go from 2,000 students to 2 million. Okay, it's not easy at all. So I think that kind of courage is required. You need to be able to, as I said earlier, to invest in education and skilling of faculty, skilling of various people involved in the organization. So as you build an AI-first organization, you also have to keep in mind, how do you keep up that human component of your organization? How do you also keep up a system that preserves and, if possible, enhances human dignity? Because humans also need to be able to feel they're doing something useful, something of value. If you don't feel you're doing something of value, then the dignity in the job will be eroded over time.
I read an interview where you talk about the need to build forward and create the future. So as this corporate landscape is rapidly sculpted by AI, crafting a strategy for transition becomes crucial. So in your view, what strategic moves should companies ingrain to successfully pivot towards this kind of AI-centric organization?
So I think, I always like to describe the process of AI transformation or digital transformation as these two forces. On one hand, most companies have an existing business operation. They're either making some widget, processing some applications in a bank, designing some products, or educating students. They're doing something. And you can apply technology to improve what you're doing. So really not changing dramatically what you're doing, just making it more efficient, more cheaper, more faster, more better. And that's really the build forwards component. You take what you have and you keep improving it with technology. At the same time, doesn't matter which business you are in, with education or banking or retail or whatever, technology opens up new possibilities in terms of new frontiers of things that can be radically different than what you can do in the future. And that's where you need to create the future, because you don't know what the future is or could be. do experiments, identify which experiments will work, and then work backwards from there. So that's where I think you have this combination of building forwards and creating backwards. That's, I think, very important in terms of how you go about navigating the space of AI transformation, digital transformation. You have to do both. If you don't do both, you'll not be able to succeed in the future.
The road to AI can be fraught with challenges, both technical and cultural, that can derail even the most visionary strategies. And for organizations that are steeped in tradition, the AI revolution can seem especially daunting. So how do you suggest these businesses dismantle legacy barriers to embrace an AI-centric modus operandi? And could you also shed light on these common stumbling blocks and perhaps even provide a roadmap for navigating through them?
Yeah, so I think, my suggestion for most organizations today is that they have to start experiments. So, if you haven't really applied chatbots, advanced AI systems inside your organization, you have to start playing with them. So this is what even Google did, 6, 7 years ago when they started first trying to get AI rolled in the organization. They required every part of the organization, every team to do one experiment with AI, whatever it is, do experiments. And some experiments will show results. But more important, those experiments will give people a more first-hand feel of technology, a more first-hand degree of comfort technology. So you have a phase of getting the organization to become comfortable experimenting, playing with technology. That's a very important first phase. Then you have to identify what are those experiments or application areas you will try to pick up and scale. And usually what I find is that those application areas typically happen in 3 buckets. So one bucket is what I would term as efficiency, automation, reduction of costs, reduction of time, improvement of quality, whatever, different classical automation benefits. Another important bucket of benefits is in improving the customer experience. Because today, there often are lots of friction points when customers deal with the organization, and AI can help eliminate some of the friction points or reduce them significantly. Why? Because a lot of the friction points are caused by gaps in knowledge, and AI systems can actually reduce that gap in knowledge and reduce that kind of friction points. And a third set of categories of applications typically are experimenting with the future. What could be the future? What could be tomorrow? And those are much more difficult, at the same time, much more harder to actually pick up and push through the system, but you have to do some of the experimentation. So I think when you look at applying AI today in organizations, I would say first do the initial just getting some comfort factor, base comfort factor, then identify, build a portfolio of projects that fit in these 3 categories. And then you have to manage the projects like any other projects in the organization, any other technology project. You'll have issues of technical, hardware, software compatibility and adoption. You'll have problems and issues in data governance and data access and data biases that come up in AI always. You'll have issues in people skilling and making sure people have the skills and willingness to adopt the technology. You'll have issues in terms of trying to make sure customers, feel secure. They don't feel the data is being, taken away from them and being used or misused in a wrong way. So you'll have a lot of the traditional implementation problems and change management issues coming up in any kind of technology implementation. So it's not really very different per se from any of the traditional IT project, but at the same level, I think that's what I would see as the opening, broad guidelines.
Culture is the soil where the seeds of innovation germinate, right? And at the risk of redundancy, because you've already started touching on this, but what cultural shifts do you think are imperative for a company to truly cultivate this AI first approach within its teams? And do you even think that's the right approach?
So I think the most important, the digital revolution happens top down, doesn't happen bottom up. And that's the reality of the situation. So even though you want widespread engagement in the organization, but the key decisions about major changes strategically happen from the top and happen top down. So which means that you have to be able to I think the most important cultural attribute required is for the leadership of the organization to have the courage to make some bold choices. And bold choices that may not work out. So failure, some may fail. So because some may fail, you need to have the courage to be able to make mistakes, learn from your mistakes, pick yourself up, and move forward. And I think that's very important. I think for me, that's the biggest cultural attribute is the leadership, courage to make and bets and accept mistakes. Of course, besides that, you have the cultural attributes of experimentation, of trying to be innovative, of trying to, foster a culture that is more agile. All those good things are required, but I would say the courage to make bold choices is what I think is the most important in my view.
I totally agree with you. And just to add on to that, like what competencies do you believe are non-negotiable for these teams that are aspiring to flourish in this AI revolution?
I think you have to be able to make bets, make bets on what you think will work, and then go and try to make it work as best as you can. And that's not really a very difficult skill, but it's hard to find. At some level, I would define it as almost execution skill. So today there are many ideas, and if you ask me how will AI impact education, I can give you 20 ideas. Okay, I'm sure someone else will give you another 20 ideas. So there are lots of ideas. The challenge is execution. So for me, the key differentiator right now is the difference between winners and not so good winners or losers is really the ability to execute successfully. And if you're able to execute successfully, I think even a fraction of the ideas that today is coming up on the horizon, that can give the organization a significant competitive advantage. But for me, the execution capability is something that is critical.
I read a quote where you state that AI will make transitions in jobs more acute and frequent, and that the skill transition is a major issue ahead of us. So what qualities, and maybe you can answer it in a different way if you want, but my question there was, what qualities stand out to you as indicators of a potential candidate's ability to thrive and innovate in an AI-centric future?
Yeah, I think, any candidate who wants to thrive in an AI-centric future has to, of course, understand technology to some degree. So you need some base, and I'm not saying become a technical expert who can program neural networks and transformers, but at least have some basic idea of what they represent, why they're powerful, why they're different. Because what people don't realize, the AI technology is different from traditional technologies, traditional software system. So you need to have some base understanding. You can get that from visiting conferences, taking part in projects, the project member team, and so on and so forth. But beyond that, you have to be able to really put your ideas and drive them forward. And that requires a set of skills which I think are no different from general leadership skills. Technology, AI is, of course, a tool that enables you to get there, but it is a general leadership skill. So you need to have the vision, and then ask the question, how can AI help you to achieve that vision? So if I have the vision, for example, of saying, well, at Oxford, I want to touch, the lives of 1 million entrepreneurs. I'm just taking a statement, just generally. Then the question is, how do I touch the lives of 1 million entrepreneurs? If the vision is there, then I can go back and say, well, let me see how I can deploy AI to do that more effectively and do more educational trainings in a more cost-effective manner. So AI fits in only to support a vision. If the vision is not there, then AI by itself cannot easily create a vision for the organization. So I think it's very important to be able to have that ability to create that vision. Otherwise, you will not be able to succeed. And then, of course, as I said earlier, and I'm repeating myself to some degree, is that you have to be able to take risks. Some risks will work out and some will not work out. So that's also very important.
I totally agree. And this workforce metamorphosis towards AI requires not just new hires, right, but also upskilling the old guard. And you've talked about the importance of a multifaceted approach that considers the impact on individuals and society. So how do organizations cultivate a continuous learning environment to keep pace with the relentless march of AI?
I'd say it's a continuous process of education. Education happens through formal education, happens through also on-the-job education. So I would say encourage people to get engaged with IT projects, AI projects. The more they engage with IT, AI projects, that's the more they learn about the technology and how it is applied. That's the best way. And then you can supplement that with some, targeted educational input. You can get them access to online courses. You can get them to go to a business school and have a discussion, in-person discussion. So I think really it's a question of making sure people have access to education and then giving them incentives to educate themselves. So I think I would look at giving incentives to people in organizations to educate themselves about AI, to educate themselves about different aspects of building AI systems so that they're able to touch and feel that in a real context, a real world context also.
In another quote, you say, to predict the future, we must help create it. By experimenting with leading technologies, we can identify successful solutions and invest in those areas. And to your point, AI is not just changing the way that we work, it's also pioneering unprecedented business models. So how do you see these new models disrupting and reshaping industries? And then how does that then go back to what you're doing in education?
No, see, the new models, to whatever degree the AI enabled, is disrupting many businesses. And here I don't have to look too far. Look at even systems that are used very commonly, like at Amazon and at Netflix. I mean, these are very common AI systems used for predicting purchases, predicting, movie viewing habits. And that is giving these companies a huge leg up, they're giving a huge competitive advantage to these companies. I think similar kinds of stories happen in multiple companies, multiple sectors. And I think it is a requirement for all leaders of organizations to ask the question, how can AI help me to become more competitive? Because the examples of companies becoming more competitive with AI already exist. They're not rocket science anymore. So it's very important to be able to work with these new possibilities and to work and to be able to deploy them successfully in the organization.
You talked about technology traditionally seeking to replace workers in various jobs, but now with AI systems becoming more popular, people are exploring how it can augment workers to help them perform tasks better or become better themselves. And the challenge is how to combine people and technology to accomplish things that neither can do alone. So picking up on an earlier point, I also see this delicate dance between AI's efficiency and human ingenuity. So how do we strike that balance that leverages the best of both worlds?
It's a very hard question to answer because it'll depend on person to person. Different people are created at different degrees, and different people have different knowledge bases, different people have different experience levels. If you really build an AI system well, it should be able to calibrate itself to the level of knowledge or level of skill of the person using it. So, it's like almost think of yourself as when you go and talk to a 7-year-old versus talk to a 17-year-old versus talking to a 37-year-old. You calibrate, because you have a sense understanding of what kind of language, what kind of topics you can discuss with them, and you change your discussion and you change your interaction accordingly. Similarly, AI has to be able to increase the effectiveness and the sort of empathy of its interactions by being able to better predict, what people likes and dislikes are, what the history is, what kind of backgrounds it comes from. And that's an important part of the whole way in which AI interacts with the human being. That interaction is something that AI also has to learn. The AI has to learn about your behavior patterns so that the AI can be a good partner to you.
We have this, my company has this all-day data science workshop coming up with a very large country's education minister and their entire cabinet. And given your vast global experience and your involvement with the Global Innovation Index and the Network Readiness Index, it would be especially interesting to get your perspective on the key challenges and opportunities that a federal government might face in leveraging AI and data science for national development. And so, like, if you were leading the discussion or the session, what specific
Yeah.
areas would you focus on, and what advice would you offer based on your insights from the GII and the NRI?
It's an excellent question once again. And I think, every country is different and every country has a different set of priorities, national priorities. So you have to customize to them. But at a high generic level, the most important indicator to me is, does the country have a national AI strategy? And if yes, what's the quality of it? Is it a document that people read? Is it a document that's credible, or is it a document that people don't read and is not credible? So for me, the most important signal of quote unquote leadership taking it seriously is having a national AI strategy document. Second important is having a home where that AI technical expertise can be based. So at Oxford, we're very lucky. We have also the mathematical, physical, life sciences faculty sitting close to us, so we can bring them into the discussion of the AI projects if and as when appropriate. So that's, I think, something what I would like to say.
So first off, this has been really fascinating, and I appreciate your time. I'd like to ask for your final thoughts, considering the rapid advancements in AI, and what are your hopes and what are your predictions for the future of this field? And is there anything else that you would like to share with our audience, or anything that you want to plug? I know you've been an author of many things as well. So yeah.
No, so I truly believe, that AI cannot be stopped. B, I truly believe that AI in the next 10 years will lead to tremendous productivity benefits, tremendous good times for companies. So it'll be a huge boom 10 years for the next 10 years. What I'm not so sure is what is going to happen after the next 10 years. I'm just using 10 years as a rough benchmark, let's say. If the progress in AI continues the rate at which it is going right now, and most people don't know. Some people feel it's going to plateau and some people feel it's going to keep on continuing. If it continues, then it is quite likely that sometime in the next 10 years or close to it, AI systems will become similar in mental complexity and mental intelligence to human beings. And that's when the more interesting questions open up in terms of, how do you handle human beings in that environment? Do you, in fact, think of, for example, agriculture got mechanized, farmers started working in factories. Factories that got mechanized today, to the latest factories, are pretty much fully automated, small number of people managing operations. Again, they've gone into the service sector. And the question is, in the service sector, if you follow what I said about empathy, creativity, and analysis, it is quite likely that as humanoid robots become more popular, we'll get more used to automation of service workers. So imagine, what would a hospital look like? Imagine what would a restaurant look like if everything was automated. A little bit like the factories today. You go to a modern factory, everything's automated, and a small number of human beings overseeing the operation. But basically, the factory floor has no human beings. So if the same environment actually moves into service sector, then we have a major issue, because 80% of the population in most countries is service sector. So what do you do with such a large number of people, if their jobs are going to get threatened or taken away in 10 years' time from now? And that's where I don't have an answer. The honest answer I don't have is simply because the solution will require a complex coordination across private sector, public policy, around corporations, and around what the government does or decides to do. The whole notion of, how will you preserve dignity of people if machines become more powerful than human beings, is a very interesting question. And I was recently in a dinner with Jeffrey Hinton, and he was very critical of what may happen in the future. His point was a very interesting one. He said that, look, in nature, there are very few examples of a less intelligent being controlling a more intelligent being. Okay, so always it's the more intelligent being controls the less intelligent being. And he says that if machines become more intelligent than human beings, then you have to follow the argument that at some stage machines will control human beings. And this notion that human beings will flick off the switch, human in the loop, and you can just flick off the switch, he argues, is not very credible because the more intelligent machine will convince the less intelligent human being not to flick off the switch. Okay. It's like you convince your dog to sit down or to go for a walk or whatever. So his view is that, and I think it's some credibility, and I give credibility to his view, is that the future doesn't look very rosy unless, okay, this is all on the assumption, let me clarify and repeat, is on the assumption that machine intelligence becomes equal or better than human intelligence. If that is not true, then none of this actually is valid. But if that becomes true, then his view is that the only solution is if the major nations of the world come together and have a collaborative agreement on slowing down and not using AI in some cases. Let's say, for example, he gives example of what happened in the nuclear arms treaty. So after Second World War, people saw the nuclear arms could destroy society, humanity. So they said, okay, let's not make this happen. Let's come together, US and Russia and whatever other countries, and let's try to have an agreement to stop use of destructive nuclear weapons. And he believes some kind of a similar agreement has to happen in AI. Otherwise, the race and the pace of AI progress will keep on getting pushed by each country for its own benefits. And we might end up in a very difficult situation. So to recap, the next 10 years, I think, are a golden age. I don't fear a lot about AI. But if the progress in AI technology continues in the next 10 years at the rate at which it's gone in the last 10 years, then I worry a lot about what's going to happen in 10 years from now.
You didn't bring it up, so if you don't mind, I'll just ask, and we don't have to go this route if you don't want to, but could you tell us about the motivation behind your book, Throwing Sheep in the Boardroom, and its relevance today? And then the other thing I was maybe thinking of was, what kind of key insights have emerged from your research on the second wave of the digital revolution?
Yeah, so the Throwing Sheep in the Boardroom is a book that was written in the early days of the social media. We were one of the first books that came up in that area. And I think what we were very good at doing in that book was predicting the impact of social media on businesses and on governments. And in the very early days, the impact was very hard to predict, that it has a profound impact on society and on business. So I think the Throwing Sheep in the Boardroom the Throwing Sheep idea was very much like throwing a disruption, in the boardroom, a disruption that you cannot actually ignore. It is there, the sheep in the boardroom, but then fundamentally you have to do something about it. So it was a call to action for board members to do something about the social media technology. And I could use the same metaphor, the same language today for AI. Today, most board members, they have to deal with AI. You cannot just like an ostrich, put your head in the sun and say, okay, it'll go away and I don't have to worry about it in my business. I think it doesn't matter which business you are, whether it's mining or AI, finance or telecoms or education, you have to deal with AI today. So I think that is something which is required very much. The last question was what? You asked the question of throwing sheep, and the other question was about?
What kind of insights have emerged from your research on the second wave of the digital revolution?
Yeah, so the second wave of digital revolution, is the insights are similar to what I've said earlier already. The pace of progress is progressing dramatically. We are in this exponential hockey stick vertical part of the curve. And so this change that is happening is dramatic. And if the intelligent potential of technology keeps increasing what is happening is the computation capability is increasing vertically, but it's not completely clear the intelligence capability is also increasing vertically. Okay, so if the two keep going in parallel, then you'll have a very strong intelligent machine or machine soon in the future. But if there's a divergence between the computation power and the machine intelligence, then maybe machine intelligence will never equal human intelligence. But the reality is that we don't know, we don't know. So all you have to do is apply technology today to make your building forward, what I said, building forwards. At the same time, do whatever experiments today make sense for creating backwards. do the experiments, identify what may work, and then try to link it to your current situation. So, technology is changing always so rapidly that you have to keep on sort of, being at the frontier. And it's a little bit like a treadmill at one level. You can't stop getting off the treadmill, but you have to keep on exploring and trying to do your best in that area.
If you don't mind, can I ask one more question?
Sure.
Yeah, I think I'd be remiss to not ask you your thoughts on generative AI and LLMs.
Oh, generative AI and LLMs are excellent examples of general purpose artificial intelligence. And of course, they have succeeded beyond what people ever thought they would. I remember in the 1990s, the AI researchers were trying to hard code human knowledge. There were these large projects in which people are trying to hard code human knowledge manually. And today, basically, a lot of that is being done in an automated fashion by sifting through this global worldwide knowledge base that is there. So really, the LLMs have found a way to make sense of this global knowledge base on the internet. And that is extremely powerful, extremely powerful. It gives a lot of broad-based capabilities to AI machines. And the challenge will be to combine that broad-based capability with more constrained local applications so that it becomes relevant to local applications. It's like, let's say you're trying to build an LLM for healthcare. An LLM for healthcare for the NHS in the UK is going to be different from an LLM for healthcare for a patient in France and different for a patient in the US. And in fact, in the US, you can argue it's different for a patient in one health system as compared to another health system, in one state as compared to another state. So the level of specificity required to make it applicable to a real situation is quite high. And that requires the ability to ingest data, and to be able to do the kind of knowledge building that's required for that. And that'll take some time. It'll take some time. But having said this, LLMs provide a general technology for doing so. So I see LLMs as being the core of a certain technology model that will give the kind of general intelligence capability. But by itself, it will not solve the issue. It has to be combined with other different approaches. But AI has always done that. AI historically has never been one clean algorithm or model. AI has always begged, borrowed, and still stolen enough models from all over the place to create a sort of engineering mix that works. And that is exactly what's going to happen to LLMs now in the future, is that people will start combining LLMs with different other models of learning and different, more specific bodies of knowledge to create more deployable, more correct, low error rate AI applications. Because you want the LLM that is deployed in Mayo Hospital to be correct for Mayo Hospital patients, as opposed to Cornell patients in New York City. And the two are different, and that knowledge difference is very important. You cannot take a generic LLM in healthcare and say, well, it's going to be applied for patients in both New York City and also in Mayo Clinic. It will not work.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dutta. It was truly a pleasure learning from your extensive experience. I look forward to seeing the continued impact of your work in shaping the future of technology and in education. Truly wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chris. Thank you for asking the questions, and a pleasure to be in the podcast. Thank you.
Thank you.